I hate the way that the name Michael's spelled.
Lemley?
I just don't like the word name. I don't like Michael. I don't like
Oh,
A-E.
just Michael in general?
Yeah, I think A-E is stupid.
Well, and it does it in his first name and his last name, because Lemley is Laemle.
Yeah. I feel
Michael,
like
you got a stupid name.
Michael in general, my brother's Michael is spelled that way.
Yeah, I mean, most Michaels are A.
I know, because it's not Michelle.
Yeah.
But, like, other languages a lot of times spell it not with an A, spell it like Michelle.
But then it's not pronounced Michael anyway. This is a different language.
I know. It could. Anyway. Yep.
Alright, but we are rolling.
So, second time I watched this movie, I watched it on literal actual 2 times speed.
No, really?
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, this was the first one that I didn't have to, like, pause to, like, take any notes. This one, I mean, I did sometimes, but for the most part, the shots are really drawn out, and so you're able to kind of work through it.
Yep. That's
and I like that about it.
When I watched on 2 times speed, there were places where I was like, skip. But just because it was so...
It's
not
super stylized.
It's visually very interesting, but then nothing's fucking happening.
Yeah.
While it's being visually interesting, so.
That's fair. I mean, I think I like this movie more than you do, but I also can see how on a rewatch you don't need to take it all in the same way.
Yeah, I liked it when I watched it the first time.
Alright, well, I'm Kimberly.
I'm Cas.
And this is Scary Accurate, a movie review podcast, because we're sick of other people getting it wrong, and this time we watched Parents from 1989. What did you think of Parents?
I liked it. I did. I really liked the stylized 50s aesthetic. 1950s aesthetic, I think, is one of those things that's, like, maybe a little overplayed now, but some of the very entertaining, like, 1980s stuff that plays through in the 1950s there. And then also, I think a big difference in this one is their soundtrack. The
soundtrack is
very
so good.
Fun and exciting, and like I know specifically some of it was like composed by a big band orchestra and played by a big band orchestra, like,
and it is manic. This soundtrack feels like you're falling into a 50s circus nightmare. Yeah. And it is excellent for it.
So it's not a 50s stylized that then just used 50s rockabilly.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I did like it. I liked it. I thought it was very predictable.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I was a little bummed out about that.
I think that its assets to me aren't about whether it's predictable or not, but it's all in the style. I think the style of it is really, really fun. And I do genuinely think that there's, like, it's obvious from the start that we're playing with the concept of cannibalism, but I do think that there's a little bit of a, you know, we need to talk about Kevin. Is it the kid misinterpreting some things? Is it what's actually happening? Because we slip in and out of these dream sequences and these highly, you know, surrealist images of blood and viscera and overlay it with sexuality in a way that makes you wonder if the kid's a reliable narrator. So I think that that's where the interest comes in, that it's not about whether it's predictable that it is a cannibal movie, but more on, you know, that questioning of what's real and what's not throughout the whole movie.
I think I needed one more thing from it. And that one thing was either something that leaned more into, is this kid not a reliable narrator? Like, him visualizing or seeing something else in the world that seems off, or it needed an element. I mean, you're talking about the themes of it leaning into the sexuality, leaning into the weirdness of it, and I think that I wish it would have just pushed more. I wish it would have pushed either more in the direction of it's actually normal, maybe it's actually normal what's going on, and the kid's just being, you know, freaked, or maybe this is something really fucking weird. I just think about, there's, much later in the movie, one scene where, like, a sausage tentacle comes and wraps around him, and when that happened, I was like, oh, fuck, yes. Or, like, the blood dripping, any of these, like, really trippy scenes, and then for it to just straight up be like cannibals.
No, I get that, and especially watching those scenes, I mean, we just watched Brain Damage together, and I was fully thinking about Brain Damage and being in kind of that surrealist, hypersexual, but dark space with those. For me, the reasons that it worked and kind of walked that line well enough is that while the visuals and the delivery of lines are very creepy from very early on, the actual things that are happening are, we're barbecuing for the family, and we are asking our kid to eat his dinner, and like these very normal things that if not seen through the lens of the child who is seeing these meat piles as massive, steaming meat piles, and seeing his parents in this dark, scary pin lighting with deep shadows, if you take that piece out of it, they are sentences that can be recontextualized in a very normal way without changing the action or the sentence. And so that's why, for me, it kind of toyed with that line, and I don't know, I thought it was really fun.
I know, and I just want to maybe we'll work through it and I'll be able to put my finger on exactly why it wasn't what I wanted it to be. Because I really did, I liked all the performances. I did like the writing. I thought that Nick, I really liked his performance.
Quaid. He's a Quaid.
Yeah, I really did like him.
He's excellent in this.
And he managed to not toe that line over into, oh, this guy's a weird sexually abusive father. Like, no, and you get this, like, you worry. Especially
There's enough to worry.
You worry that you are getting the edge of something and then not seeing the rest of it. You know what I mean?
And I think that's interesting, too, because it puts us in the position of some of the other adults in Michael's life who are sitting here listening to the things that he says and trying to assess what the risk level is. Mm-hmm. And they do hear some of these slightly worrisome things about his family, and they are a little concerned, but none of it's enough to fully raise the flag. So then, as an audience, they do the same thing to you, where, Dad says, oh, well, can I get a kiss too? And there's like this weird dark tension to it. But it's not anything if you just take it for what's at face value. And I think it's just such a fun experiment with style and with tone.
Yeah, the style, it is, I do really like it. I do really like style. And I like the movie. I think maybe, I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming you. But you did give me absolutely don't read any descriptions of this before.
Because I hate that the description says, like, his parents are cannibals. And I'm like, well, I feel like it takes away the layer of they could be, or, the kid does say some weird shit that you could reinterpret in other ways. And so it's just,
I was 100% on them being cannibals. Maybe not. I don't know. They either should have kept the ambiguity further in or removed the ambiguity earlier. I don't know.
That's fine.
I don't know. Because now I'm thinking back to the blood orgy situation thing, the blood sex thing. Yeah. And then we'll talk about it.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, when this film was being released in Germany, the title was just Daddy is a Cannibal.
I saw that.
Which I thought was hilarious. But that also, even by saying that it's about cannibalism out the gate, I do still think that because the tone is the way that a child would say it, I do still think that maintains the, the themes that I like about the movie, the unreliability of it. Anyway, do we want to dive in?
Yes.
Cool, alright. Let's do roll call. Parents came out in 1989, and it's directed by Bob Balaban, who is primarily an actor first, which surprises me a little bit with just how stylized this film is, that I feel like actors first don't always deliver such a wildly interesting film visually.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's a bad bias, but he is an actor first. He's in a bunch of the Christopher Guest comedies, but he's also in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and he's in Altered States.
Mm-hmm.
But then as a director, he's better known for directing a bunch of episodes of George Romero's Tales from the Dark Side. Although he said in an interview he never got to meet Romero, and that bums me out.
Damn.
It's like, not just one episode, but like he's done a bunch of their episodes.
That would make me so sad.
Right?
I'd sign on, I'd be like, oh, thank God, I'm so excited to meet George Romero.
Right? You're like, here's my big chance. I have to tell you though, I watched a panel that he did, and he is a bit of a bummer of a guy.
Yeah, no, he is kind of...
He's people were asking him, did you have fun on the set? And he goes, no, I don't like to talk about it. And they're like, oh, are there stories of, like, things that went wrong? And he goes, no, the actors were nice. And then he didn't say anything else.
Which is so funny. If you watch his, there is I don't remember who made it, but there is a documentary about the making of Night of the Living Dead. That is, like, Romero-focused.
Oh my gosh, I meant that Bob Balaban's a bit of a...
Oh, I thought you meant George Romero.
No.
I was like, I don't feel like Romero's usually got stories.
No, I've heard wonderful things and seen wonderful, energized, enthusiastic interviews of Romero, but Bob Balaban seems to be a little bitter about a lot of things.
That's funny. Well,
mostly because he's like, people were saying, how has the reception of this movie changed? Because it wasn't very popular when it came out, and now it does have a little bit of a cult following. I mean, he was there in a room doing a panel for it after a screening of it.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it didn't change my life. I don't think that anyone cares about this movie. And it was just a little...
And everybody there's like, well, we do.
Literally, the host was like, okay.
We all bought tickets to be here, so...
Oh, man, but that's Bob. That's our director for this one. And then the cast, we've got the Laemmle family. The surname Laemmle is probably a nod to Carl Laemmle Jr., who produced Frankenstein and Dracula and The Mummy and The Invisible Man, so it's kind of like a little in-joke, or it's not. Honestly, maybe it's not. After watching his interview, I'm not even so sure, but
I feel like...
let's give him credit for what might be there. And then in the cast, we have Randy Quaid playing Nick Laemmle, the dad in the family. Obviously, he's got this very successful movie career, and he's most recognizable as Cousin Eddie from the National Lampoon franchise.
Oh, see, that's what I was the whole time.
Yeah?
Because my brother, for Christmas, dressed up as Cousin Eddie. And, I'm gonna say, fucking nailed it.
Yeah?
And he has the jersey and wore the hat.
Oh my god, that's so good.
And that's why it was in my mind. I'll have to show you.
Well, that's this guy. So
yes.
Now you see why something was itching at the back of your brain.
No, now I'm looking at his IMDb page because I didn't. He's Dennis Quaid's brother. Yeah, that is what I kind of thought. Oh, he was in Home on the Range, the animated film.
I was gonna say, do you have any feelings about that? Because I don't.
I liked the movie, but it's one of those that kind of lives in the VHS preview part of my mind, where I really can only picture about 3 things, and Rosie O'Donnell as a cow is one of them.
That's how I feel about Land Before Time. We had Land Before Time on VHS, and I can just picture glimpses.
Oh, I remember
glimpses of that movie.
That movie is so... Revisit that movie.
Yeah.
It's so fucking sad, Kimberly. But it's really, really well made.
See, I can only remember the sad ones on VHS, because that's also how I feel about Neverending Story. That I can picture it. Now, mind you, for that one, I can only picture the saddest scene in Neverending Story and nothing else.
I think I was also so vulnerable to the anxiety about my mother dying that Land Before Time, like at the beginning, his mother dies. And it is like, oh my god, and it's so emotional, and it's this little dinosaur. It's like Simba, where he's like, Dad,
no.
That's exactly, but he's like, Mom, and then he cuddles up next to her dead body.
Oh god.
Anyway, it has nothing to do with anything.
In the role of Lily Laemmle, the mom of the family, we've got Mary Beth Hurt, who has worked consistently since the 70s, but I have to be honest, I scrolled through, I didn't find anything that was super notable, but, working actress, successful. And then Brian Modorsky plays Michael Laemmle, the kiddo, who I think is about, 10 or so in the movie, the character. And according to his IMDb, he is an accountant now.
God bless him.
He has not done any other movies.
That kid looks like an accountant.
He does have that energy. So, good for him. Good for him for not ending up in the Scary Hollywood pipeline. As if parents would have been the ticket into the Scary Hollywood pipeline, but,
Yeah.
In the role of Millie Dew, there is Sandy Dennis, and Bob Balaban says he has no idea why she said yes to this project. Because she was super successful at the time, in the 60s and 70s. She won an Oscar for the role of Honey in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Just
yeah, I recognized her.
And she's excellent in this movie. She is. I really like every performance in this movie. But no one knows why she said yes to it, but she did, so good for her.
Good for her.
Then we have London Juno, which is her current stage name, but at the time she's credited as Juno Mills Cockle, and she plays Sheila Zellner, who is the weird classmate girl, which has, again, lots of weird dark theming that we're gonna get into at some point here. But it's heavy. But she has some sporadic credits following this movie, but this is really her biggest hit. And then lastly, we've got Catherine Grody, who plays Miss Baxter, who is the teacher, and I only included her in my little roll call lineup because she, since 1980, has been married to Mandy Patinkin. So, not to credit her with her husband, because she's doing some things, but they're not as big, but you might recognize Mandy Patinkin's name a little bit more. So, sure. You know what? Cool. But getting into it, we open the movie on a really up-close, still black and white image of Michael Lemley's face. And then we cut directly into fun, sassy saxophone music and classy overhead neighborhood shots. It is so obviously 1950s right out the gate. As the family is rolling into the neighborhood that they just moved into and they're driving around, it is the perfect picture of domestic life. You've got Michael packed in the back of the car, surrounded by all the groceries, and the parents greet the crossing guard, and they drive past the new school to say, this is where you're gonna go.
In the weirdest wave I've ever seen in my entire life. At the beginning of this, the way that they wave, and then the crossing guard waves at them, I was like, is this an Invasion of the Body Snatchers thing? I literally was like, are they fucking aliens?
Do they live?
They don't wave like a normal person.
No, it's weird, and so
which I'm sure is kind of on purpose.
Part of it, First Nick waves, and then the guy waves back, and then Lily waves, and then they all turn to the back, they're like, Michael, wave.
Michael, Jesus, Michael, come on.
Yeah, and so he kind of waves, and we finally move on. It already sets up that we have this, crazy candy style 1950s perfection, but it's already weird. Something's broken in it, which is fun. And then back at home, we get this compilation of domestic life for them. So the saxophone music keeps playing, and we get Mom and Dad dancing around the kitchen. We get Mom making a cake, Dad playing golf in the living room. It's very goofy. And then we have Mom and Dad seasoning and grilling a massive, massive pile of meat outside.
Yeah, and that one's shot from it definitely changes angle,
It's a low angle
all of a sudden. It's a low
sudden.
angle, and you're seeing kind of the shadow-ish on their face, but it's still very within sitcom.
Yes.
I mean, none of it's not shot like, it's not single cam, but yeah, they call it single camera, don't they?
I don't know what you're going for right now.
Well, there's different types of sitcom setups.
Oh, sure.
But
no, it's not that. None of
like
it's
that.
quite like that, but it is still, very, friendly.
Why did I used to know a lot about that?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Take a perform workshop at some point?
You know what?
Did you?
Yeah, I did actually.
See?
We had to write a sitcom. I do remember
there
this.
It is. Thank you, School for Arts and Performance.
You know what? I do genuinely thank you, Mr. Weber, for really giving me some knowledge about everything I didn't need to know. But guess what? Got a theater degree.
You know what? Me too. Me too.
And
we're both working in theater and in the arts, and
I'm paying for this apartment with it.
Doing that thing.
This beautiful closet recording studio.
This beautiful closet that we're recording in. So after their grilling, we cut to the dinner table, and Lily serves Nick a pile of freshly cooked chops. She doesn't say pork chops, which is what most people would say, but she says, I know you love chops, which I just thought was a funny little nod. And all of these, time keeps passing, so they're separate outfits. You can tell that we've got all these separate days. We're just getting a taste of their life, if you will. The saxophone music finally ends, and Michael is sitting in the living room quietly watching his parents while they are playing with a puzzle at the table, and they're just making small talk about Nick's work life. And already we're crossing the line into, what's an appropriate amount of sexuality in front of your children? Because Nick starts, kissing down his wife's neck, and they're really kind of getting into it a little bit. And Lily looks up, and she sees Michael, and she's not even oh, we didn't know you were there. She's just like, Michael, it's bedtime. And that's it. There's no clocking of it.
Yeah. It's okay, time for the kids to go to bed. I think there's an interesting contrast that they create also by setting it in this time period and upping the sexuality, because
you're not expecting it.
Yeah, because the standard of affection and sexual contact in a 1950s setting, if you're watching a movie from the 50s or a sitcom or something, is so hands off.
Right, separate beds.
Barely kiss. You could, the the TV ratings, you couldn't...
Can't use a toilet on...
Yeah, yeah.
Or even show a toilet on screen.
You know, you have to be wearing fucking head-to-toe nightgown to get into bed, like, yeah. So, scene... Yeah, and I have and I think probably too reserved in some ways, like, feelings about parents, like, being sexually, or not sexually, but, like, sensually. Yeah.
You know, I feel like there is a range of what's acceptable versus what's comfortable, right? I think that acceptable goes further than comfortable, where you're like, listen, there's nothing wrong with it, I'd prefer for it to not be happening, but there's nothing wrong with it. And for reference, this goes past both. Yes. This is already, even though they're not like, you know...
There's no touching.
There's no groping, but it is still very obviously, like, too much.
Yeah. We see it and we think it's foreplay, and the kid sees it and he's just like, ugh.
Not understanding what's happening.
Yeah.
So Lily tells him that it's time to go to bed, and Nick offers to carry him up, but Michael is afraid to go to bed because it's dark, and instead of being normal and comforting like a parent normally would, to be like, oh no, don't worry about it, like, the dark's not too scary, and I'll check your closet for monsters, and, you know, just like the run-of-the-mill parent stuff. Instead, his dad says, other places are dark too, like the cellar, and, you know, one day the lights will all be off, and everything's gonna be dark, and you only have to be careful in one dark place. And he points to his head, and you're like, what is this? And already, the lighting is super theatrical and crazy. The stylized world is, you've got this bright lights and these bright colors, but there's these deep shadows. Everything is shot with the lights at a really harsh angle, so that the shadows cut across people's faces, and then there are these really tight pin key lights to illuminate just the faces all the time. You know, and so it really does put us into that child's perspective of fear, and the filmmaking has something dark hiding behind the sticky sweetness of it. And so I'm in at this point. I'm in it, I'm on board. And so Nick carries Michael up the stairs, and the camera swaps to Michael's point of view. So if you remember when you're being carried as a child, you know, everything bounces and warps, and it's really well captured in that way. And so you see the dark living room kind of jolt around and warp because his head's bouncing as he's being carried up the stairs. Once they get into the bedroom, Nick recounts that he used to believe in monsters, but he grew up to be a big, strong man, and he isn't afraid anymore. And that sounds a little more appropriate, but I'm telling you, it was not delivered in that way. No. I'm telling you. But this plays into where you're like, is it creepy or not? Is it because the sentence wasn't scary, but the way that Randy Quaid delivers it is very scary? Yeah,
anytime, I don't know, the big strong man thing, it is always just like, is it just weird, generational, toxic masculinity? Or is it you being like, time for you to grow up and be a man, like... You're growing into a big, strong... I don't know.
Or is it an expression of something else? Like a man who's a murderer.
Yes, like a man
I'm big and strong. I kill people now. Yes. I became the monster.
I became the monster, exactly.
I used to be afraid of monsters, and I grew up, and now I am one, and I'm much more comfortable that way. Yeah. You know, it's rather dark, but he lays Michael in bed, and he turns out the light. So after Nick lays Michael in bed and turns out the light, we have a set of shots that are following just Nick's feet and following Nick and Lily into the kitchen where they're stopping by the fridge for a midnight snack. And we don't see what they take from the fridge, but they are being very flirtatious. Yeah. The energy is very heavy and sexual.
It's like standing footsie, which is a little weird.
It's odd.
Yeah.
It's odd, but you know what?
It's cute.
It sets a tone.
It's cute enough.
I liked that it wasn't just watching them talk, you know?
No, me too.
There's a lot of, I would say, borderline experimental choices. I wouldn't say they're fully experimental, but we are playing with a lot of different, just creative for the sake of creative, and I'm cool with that. Clatter, clatter, clatter.
Ignore my pen font.
How dare you take notes? Are these notes that you have?
These are going to be the equivalent of me putting my finger on my nose for later.
Oh, I like that.
So
excellent.
I'm trying to remember the stuff I'm thinking of until it's relevant.
Perfect. Back in his bedroom, Michael wakes up and he checks under his bed, looking around for monsters. There's nothing down there. And then he starts to undress, which is something we get a very small glimpse into later. It comes up in conversation, but it's not much. So he takes off his robe and his sleep shirt. He's still, wearing clothes. He's in, a little kid tank top and, sleep pants. And he dives onto the bed as if he's attacking it. But the bed falls through, and it becomes this major pool of blood in this surrealist shot where his pillow starts floating through the blood and floating hands are whirlpooling around in the red water. And this is the point in the movie. When I first played this, I was just like multitasking and sewing and throwing on a movie in the background. And this was when I turned it off to watch it later, when I was like, I think I want to actually watch this movie, you know? We're doing interesting things here.
I love that. I love big blood moment. I did laugh because it is Big Blood, 1980s Big Blood.
Oh, yes.
Which is water with coloring in it.
Yes, red water. Red water all the way.
I'm like, can't we do something about saturation? Or even in overpaint.
Just deepen the shadows.
Even in like a literal overpaint of the film with saturation to make it more red, I like better than...
I like it in context where it has to be blood, but in this dreamy sequence, it didn't bother me. You know what I mean?
It didn't bother me that much.
It didn't bother me here. There's other times that I wish it was blood, but, you know... We'll get there.
That's life.
The whirlpool of blood transitions into Michael's hand in a bowl of sauce as the jaunty music careens back in, and his mother is cooking. She starts to play hot or cold with him, and as she's walking around the kitchen, you know, hotter, colder, on fire, that kind of stuff. And then she stabs into the bowl of sauce where his hand was and pulls out some meat that she'd been preparing. But she just, you know, chastises him for it, that it wasn't supposed to go in the sauce yet until it's already been cut, and so... It's playful, but ominous, which is, I think, the tone for most of the movie. Michael isn't craving breakfast, but Lily shares that when they moved, all of their frozen things defrosted, so she's prepping a little bit of this and that, and they're just gonna have to get used to eating whatever they're having. He looks at the pan, and it looks an awful lot like kidneys. It doesn't look like...
It looks like liver, I think. Or kidneys or liver. I'm trying to remember what liver looks like when it's... But... It looks like
organ meat. It does not look like
it doesn't
steak.
Look like like sausage or steak or anything, but it didn't strike me as that weird for 1950s.
No. It's another one of those things that, again, if any of these things happened alone, I don't think it would look like they were cannibals, but all of these things happen.
A lot of the food, which I think is super fun because it's so food-focused, the food has the very Betty Crocker, Better Home and Gardens 1950s. Like, a lot of it. You see the cake at one point.
Yes.
And it's like... I mean, they look almost plastic because it's these weird colors. It's the Jell-O mold style stuff. It's the weird, like... Oh, I put salmon and, you know, tartar sauce together and made it, into, you know.
On all of the perfect little plates and all the little colored dishes. It
is one of those things, the weird experimental 1950s food, which is one of the reasons where, you know, I think the meat as just meat, like this, is very not refined by the, you know, is this suburbia.
Yes. There's a huge contrast between the meat and everything else about their lives in the house. So while Lily's preparing this meal, she's chopping vegetables and feeding them to Michael, and he tells his mom that he had a nightmare last night. So she says that he always has nightmares when he takes off his pajamas, and she chastises him for taking off his pajamas, even though he insists that he didn't. We know that he did, because we watched the sequence. It's odd.
It is. As a person, I would have to say, one of the funny things is I don't know if it's supposed to be a weird, ominous nod, sort of thinking about the context, or if he's just not supposed to be conscious of what he's doing, because as a child, and I still have nightmares about this sometimes, I was a chronic stripped down naked.
Me too!
Yes, because I'd get so hot.
I would sleepwalk and I would strip down naked and I would, like, go pee in front of the toilet, but not in the, like, I mean, I was...
Oh, okay, you were worse than me.
No,
I didn't sleepwalk, but...
I am still a bad sleepwalker. It's mostly better than it was when I was a kid.
This, yes.
Unfortunately.
But I sleep naked now, but can sleep with clothes on and won't take my clothes off, like, if I'm somewhere.
Oh, no, I'll take them off. Well, if I'm somewhere,
I've trained
I'm good
myself.
when I'm somewhere.
Yeah, like if I'm in a hotel, like, with people... But as a kid, I, like, wouldn't. I, like, wouldn't wake up. I'd just, like, strip naked at a sleepover or whatever. And thankfully, like, if I was in a sleeping bag or whatever. And I was horrible at sleepovers, so it wasn't a problem that often. But I would. And then I'd wake up and I'd be like, what the fuck? And I still have nightmares where I'll, like, go to school and then realize, like, oh my god, my pants are gone. Like, oh my god, my shirt is gone.
The classic naked nightmare.
I'll be like, what's happening? Yeah, so I sympathize.
For me, it's the just weird sleepwalking, because one of my family's favorites is when we were staying at my grandparents', and in the night I had gotten out of the bedroom I was staying in, gotten into the bedroom that my parents were staying in, and propped myself up, like, using the skis that were in the corner, and, like, gotten myself all tangled. And apparently, in my sleep, all I said was, "Daddy, help!" as I was tumbling with all these skis. And they woke up to their daughter, like, in a pile of skis in the corner and, like, had to bring me back to bed.
God, children are too much.
So stupid.
So much.
I love that so much of this movie feels like that. You know, I feel like a kid watching a lot of it, because it really captures what things look like and feel like when you're a child.
Yeah.
To a startling degree of accuracy.
Yeah.
After Michael insists that he didn't take off his pajamas last night, he's in a bit of a mood. He says that it was a mistake moving here. You know, he's disturbed by these images right now, so it's all in his head. And when he says that, it upsets Lily, so she slips and she cuts her finger while she's been chopping these vegetables. And she gets right in his face and tells him to get out of there. And it's very much so when you are really frustrated with a child and you know you can't yell, but you know you could put on a joking voice. That's what she's doing, where she's like, "Grr, get out of here." But it's silly enough that she was able to get him out of her sight, and that was incredibly real.
I think
that's what I think a lot of parents I have seen do.
And it's interesting because I was expecting some sort of worse turn from her, and she really is a pretty good mom.
She's in Michael's corner to the end.
Yes, and I like that a lot. I really did. I really liked her as a character.
So once Lily kicks him out, Michael peers through the window and he's watching his dad play golf in the yard amidst all of their furniture. The implication is that they're in the middle of moving still, but it is odd that their furniture is still in the yard, because we've gotten many sequences of them, like, living life in the house. But the whole yard is full of furniture, like the moving truck arrived today. But while watching his dad, Michael makes a finger gun and pretends to shoot his dad through the window. Pew. All creepy-like, not goofy-like.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where, amongst other things, we're beginning to see that Michael may also be a little bit messed up.
One of the things that gets me about the movie, and I can't even say if I like it or don't like it, is the complete lack of context of where they were before, what their life was like before, if this is a huge change in the way Michael's acting. Like, he's a very quiet, reserved kid in a way that is kind of alarming, and the parents don't seem alarmed by it. You know what I mean? They don't seem like this is different, so what has changed? Whether or not their behavior has changed once they moved, or if Michael's just now noticing it.
I feel like it's that piece, because they describe that they, you know, have moved towns before. Later on, when things are really bad, they're talking about, I think it's time for us to move again.
Exactly.
And as if the cycle's just going to restart. And I think that there's a lot of clues that even if Lily loves Michael, I don't think that she is engaged with him.
Yeah.
None of the family seems to really know what's going on with him. You know, there are times that she's later on questioned by the school as to, like, what Michael does, and she's very, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Or at one point he comes home from school and both parents were like, "Oh, you're home early." And he's like, "I literally got out of school, like at regular school gets out time." Yeah. And they're just confused by it. So I feel like their scary, weird relationship and their extracurricular activities as parents keep them out of their child's life. Yeah. And so while I don't think she doesn't love him, I do think she loves him. I do also think that they're not good parents. You know? She's in his corner, but she doesn't know him. I
think I'm putting my finger on one of the things that is kind of a parallel of it. And maybe it's because I like body snatchers and I like... Yeah. They are alienated from their child to the point of them seeming alien.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And because it's from their kid's point of view, everything they do is odd and alien feeling. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, if that had been the turn in the movie, which, honestly, it could be.
It wouldn't have to change much about the movie.
No, exactly. That is my headcanon, I guess, of it.
I like that. I'm with that.
it's just a passed down, weird, not quite being human thing.
Yeah.
And because it's the 50s, the being alienated from your child is much more common feeling.
Right.
So you're not as immediately keyed in to the fact that they are unusually alienated until, like, as you're saying, they don't know when their kid gets home from school.
Just basic things about
like what he's up to.
What their, like,
10-year-old
8 to 10-year-old, like, this young
10.
kid, what he does all day is a mystery to them, which is crazy.
Which feels very alien. Which feels like
it does.
They kidnapped him and brainwiped him, and he's, like, now their test child.
Will, I have thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I'm putting my finger on my nose and trying to hold on to them for later, but that is for much later in the movie. There's a line that I think leads us in that direction as well.
Yeah.
So back in the house, Michael is sitting on the steps to the basement while his dad is bringing bottles for their wine cellar. Nick asks for a light, and Michael ominously shines the flashlight directly onto his face like a little spotlight. And Nick notes that the cellar blocks are great temperature regulators, and he leans onto the wall, and the wall does bend, even though it's all cinder blocks. It's excellent.
It's like one of the only IMDb fun
There's
facts.
There's so few fun facts. Guys, I watched so many interviews and panels and tried to get interesting facts, but I told you, Bob Balaban doesn't really have much to say about this movie, and IMDb has a handful, but not much.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you everything I've got. That's all I've got for you today. But he says that this isn't a playground, but it's a place for the wine to age, so he's trying to get Michael out of the cellar. Nick tells Michael that things are going to be very different for him now, in a new place with new friends, and that he's gonna have more time to spend with his dad. At the school, now this is the first time that we're seeing the school that Michael's moving to. Miss Baxter is his teacher, and she is teaching a deeply disengaged class. Literally no one looks or reacts to anything that she says at all, which is unnecessary, but it's a funny little touch.
Yeah, I mean...
And Sheila Zellner and Michael are both asked to stand and to share something about themselves since they're both new. Sheila moved over from another class, and Michael moved in from Massachusetts. Sheila shares that you can make a martini with an onion to make a Gibson, and Michael decides to share how to become invisible, which is to broil a black cat and skin it down and chew on its bones and drink the marrow. And that deeply disturbs everyone in the class.
The teacher's like, oh.
Except for Sheila. For some reason, Sheila goes, that's exactly what I'm looking for, thank you very much. So outside in the schoolyard, Sheila and Michael are, interrogating each other, asking each other all these questions in a very stilted, weird kind of a way. Like how Wes Anderson movie kids are weird, though,
Yeah, like they're not quite kid-like.
They're not kid-like. And so they're asking things like, where'd you learn that about the cat? What does your family do? Where are you from? And Sheila is... I kid you not, like 2 feet taller than this kid.
They are... I don't know what grade Sheila seems like she's in.
Right, she says that she was held back.
Yeah, she definitely seems older by a couple of years.
And
probably
even in the classroom, Michael feels young compared to the other kids.
Which he might be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did they mention what grade he's in? I don't remember.
No. My guess on age is purely a guess. They just kind of...
They say 10.
They do at one point?
Yeah,
I missed that.
Well, they do in the movie summaries and stuff. I don't remember if they said it in the
actual movie.
In the actual movie.
That drives me crazy when summaries are like, here's information that we probably should have put in our movie, but we forgot.
I know, yeah.
I'm like, I had no way of knowing that, but thanks.
And 10 is like 3rd grade.
Yeah, ish. Yes.
I'll have kids.
12 is like 6. No, that's older. 10 is like 4th or 5th, because 12 is like 6th.
And 13 is like 8th grade. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I would say they're probably 5th graders. And she should be a 6th grader.
I think that makes sense. This is not relevant at all. But anyway, there's a big height difference, and she says it's because she was held back and that she's from the moon. And this perfectly captures when kids tell long-winded lies for no reason.
I fucking love that.
I remember I convinced my bus buddy that my house was shaped like Hello Kitty.
That's so bizarre.
For some reason, I don't know why I made up this lie, but I convinced her, and we talked about it all the time. And I remember the first time she came to my house, she was so mad at me. And I don't even remember how I got myself out of that one, but I do remember making that up.
I think I've been a terrible liar always. And so, I don't know if I ever came up with anything that interesting.
See, my family makes fun of me because I've been a good liar
I know.
always.
I can imagine you saying random shit.
People believe me. I don't know why. Don't take a single thing I say seriously,
I know.
please.
It kills me.
Oh no. So she's describing why it's good to be on the moon, and she's saying that the moon's great because you can eat whatever you want, and you can make a spill on your dress, and nobody's gonna yell at you. And just like we have with Michael, like these weird implications that there might be stuff going on, Sheila does occasionally say things that imply that maybe there's something going on in her house too, but then when we meet her family, everything seems normal. So it's really just kind of the hallmark of this movie, is that dark stuff might be happening and you're not gonna know.
Sheila, I got the sense pretty concretely from what Sheila was saying. Either that or she was a child who had a lot of trouble on her own, but I got the sense that it was like family trouble.
Well, and especially with some of her behavior patterns later, which we'll get into.
Yes, exactly.
But she says that she loves that Michael asks all these questions and that that's what she looks for in a man, and they agree that he can come over and hang out at her place sometime. So Michael goes home, and this is the scene we were talking about earlier where nobody is home, and this shot, I love this shot because it's this really wide shot, and everything in the house is really tall. You know, we've got a lot of these really tall, long lines. You know, those, like, mid-century modern entryways that had those slatted entrances?
Yeah.
You know, there's one of those right next to him, which creates these really long lines, and then we've got tall lamps and tall art, and we've got the stairwell, and so Michael looks so tiny in this house, just so itty-bitty and frail.
I know.
And he's calling out, he's like, Mom, Dad, is anybody home? And this is when Nick creeps up from the basement stairs, and he says that Michael's home early, but, you know, he was just downstairs because he was grabbing a wine to let it breathe before dinner. And then Lily walks in from the other room, and she's got 2 wine glasses, and she's also just as surprised that Michael is there. And it's very clear that they're upset that Michael is interrupting something, but they're trying to play it off.
Yeah.
It's just a weird vibe. Except this is when Michael shares that he's not home early at all. They just had no clue when school lets out. Later, we cut to dinner, and this is where his family starts asking about Sheila, because his mom says that, ooh, Michael likes a girl at school, so clearly he must have told his mom a little bit about her before this. And he says that she's an alien. His mom goes, foreign?
He's
like, no, from the moon! From the moon, Mom! But it was...
Oh, yeah, sure, man.
You know, and then he says that she taught the class how to make a Gibson, and both of his parents are very upset that he's telling all these lies. Which is unfortunate because both of these are exactly like what happened in his day today.
I know, yeah. He's like, I'm not telling lies. Sheila told me this.
She literally is from the moon, and she taught us how to make a Gibson.
Yeah.
So Nick scolds Michael, and he tells him to just eat his meat. Michael, in bed later, is staring at the ceiling, and there is a small crack in the plaster, and this is when Lily comes in to check on him, and Michael is just hyper-fixated on this crack in the ceiling. This doesn't come back. It's, again, all these just subtle nods that things are weird and trying to draw the line between is something happening or is this just children being afraid?
Yeah, of things that don't make sense. I feel deeply.
I like this one because this is one that, you know, his mom lays in bed with him and she looks at it and she explains in great detail that the new house that they moved to uses gas and that the expanding pipes make the plaster crack, or maybe it's when the pipes constrict, but either way it has to do with the gas lines and the ceiling, and I don't know enough about the plaster to tell you if that's real or not, but it is, I know that it cracks all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I don't know if that's the reason it cracks, but I know that it cracks all the time.
You can literally see it in the wall.
Oh, in our closet recording studio. If you look
up there, you can see the plaster's cracked.
Oh, yes.
From the gas lines.
You know, and so she explains it to him, and now he's a little bit less scared than he was before, which is so incredibly normal. Like, that's how kids react when they don't understand things. But then Michael says that he's got this great idea, and that they'll never have to buy gas again if they found people who are meant to be hanged, and then they chop off their hands, and then the hands will burn forever. Which is insane. So at this point, this is really where, between this comment and the boiling the cat comment and these things where, for me, it does take it in that we need to talk about Kevin direction of like, okay, is the kid messed up and it's making the parents look worse than they are? Is the parent messed up and it's making the kid look worse than they are? You know, this
Is the kid messed up because
of his parents?
Yeah.
You know, it's unclear because Lily doesn't support this. She says absolutely nothing about the burning hands comment, and she just says, I love you, and she leaves, and he goes to bed.
Yeah.
Later on, he's walking in the house, Michael is, and he goes out into the living room, and he catches his parents in an act of sexuality. We don't get a full glimpse of what's going on at this point, but they are laying over some white sheets, and there's white towels. It's a lot of white for contrast, and it's very clear that they're hooking up, and his mother's lipstick is spread all over her face and his father's face.
Yes.
And that's what we get a flash of. And they just look like they've been having sex. And their kid walks in, and so they are super startled and upset that he's walked in on them, which is nice to see that they react that way, because so far they've had no issue with, you know, being seen in a sexual encounter.
Exactly, yes.
But she's freaking out, and she carries Michael back to bed right away. The next day at school, Miss Baxter is passing out workbooks, and Michael tells Sheila that he has a secret to tell her about his parents. But Miss Baxter separates them because they're being chatty in class, and the students are given an assignment to draw a picture of their family. So when Miss Baxter is then later on in the night at home grading all the students' work, she finds Michael's drawing, and, as expected in every horror trope ever, he has drawn this incredibly disturbing picture of his family, where he's got his mom and his dad, and he scribbled red all over the whole page, and then he drew himself in, like, this box in the middle, and looking sad and weird, and it's just, you know, the classic, oh, this kid's messed up drawing, right?
Yeah, right? For once, I just want to see the kid be like, grow up to be fucking Salvador Dali. Like,
right?
They're like, oh, it actually wasn't a problem. The kid's just got, like, weird artistic tastes.
You know, how many people we went to an arts high school.
Oh, I know.
So many people that made weird, disturbing art that are now just
normal
adults.
Yeah, I'm sure that, the art I made, it was all reflection of inner turmoil, not of things happening in my family.
Right. Well, and I think that that's also one of the interesting parts of this, and especially when you compare Michael to Sheila, is that right around this age, and I know it's younger than people like to think, but realistically, it's around this age that kids start to get ideas about sexuality. And it's not that they're, like, determining things about themselves in, like, a concrete way, or, you know, this is when people really begin to realize, okay, there is this secret thing that happens.
Yes.
That you don't know about, and that you can start to imagine and interact with, and that's where I think a lot of the darkness around this kind of spills over, where a lot of it's just being a kid at that age.
And in our culture, and in the time period.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah, in the time period especially, and then in the culture we grew up in also, surrounding, like, Christianity, and I grew up Catholic, and we definitely, like, there was no discussion or idea, whereas I feel like there definitely is a good way to introduce the idea of how babies are made and what sexuality is before, at this age especially, like,
I was gonna say, my first,
better.
In public school, my first human growth and development and sex ed, but, like, boiled down, simple sex ed was around this age. I was in elementary school, late elementary. I think it was a thing that the 5th graders did.
Yeah.
You know, and, except, you know what I think about sometimes? The video that they had us watch was fish. Cartoon fish.
Huh.
And then the semen traveled through the water to the other fish. Fish aren't mammals.
Yeah.
Fish aren't mammals.
They
fish
were like,
lay
let's
eggs.
Come up with something that doesn't have to do with
sex at all. Something where the bodies never even have to touch. And that was incredibly confusing, because I remember asking the teacher innocently. I really wasn't trying to be I was a kid just asking questions, and I was like, how does the semen reach the egg? And they were so mad at me. They were like, didn't you watch the video? I'm like, yeah, it all got in the water. How does it get there?
Yeah, you're like, what the fuck are you talking
understand.
about?
I'm not
we
a
supposed
fish.
to have sex in water? What is this?
It's like in Glee when they fool around in the hot tub. And
my god, yes.
Oh my god.
Well, yeah, that is so confusing that
they did that. It was so confusing to me. I still think about it sometimes. I'm like, why did it looked like the rainbow fish. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, I don't super remember. I don't think we probably did any videos. I don't think there was any videos or anything at that age. And I don't think there was any diagrams or things. It was all health and wellness and no reproductive talk for the most part in 5th grade. We didn't have that until 8th grade. They had
Man, kids are pregnant by 8th grade.
I know.
You've got to teach them younger than that.
And we had a couple of kids.
And you don't want to face that reality, but that's life.
And we didn't have anybody when I was in school who got pregnant. First of all, if you got pregnant, you would leave. Yeah, you would leave school. I know that family that I've had, during this time period, 50s, 60s, got pregnant and then just left and then came back and they weren't pregnant anymore because they had just had a baby and then come back.
Their family raises a new sibling or,
exactly. Or, an aunt or an uncle takes a baby or whatever. But we didn't have anybody in school who got pregnant that early, but we had a number of girls who went to then the public school right after and got pregnant in freshman or sophomore year of high school. And those girls, especially kids with siblings who were a little bit older, a lot of times then would start hanging out with kids outside of the Catholic school group and then would get boyfriends that were freshmen or sophomore in high school while they were in 8th grade.
Well, and when you're in that position that they haven't been taught the full story or given a shame-free context to have those conversations, they're going to start learning from other kids, too.
Yes.
Then, their 15-year-old sibling thinks that they know something, and
my God,
that's also a child.
Do you really want your kids to experiment to find out the basic of something? No. The basic of it should be what they learn, and then they should be able to experiment in a safe way.
Oh my
Instead of it doesn't matter. This is not part of it.
Anyway, I'm going to wrap us back into the movie here.
Nothing.
After Miss Baxter discovers that he's drawn this disturbing image, at home, Lily receives a phone call. It's very clearly the school that's calling to say, hey, there's something disturbing going on. So she drives Michael to school to see Millie Dew, the school psychologist, to explain the family portrait and to discuss it further. And this is when we realize that Lily doesn't really know a lot about Michael, or she doesn't want to discuss what's actually happening. And either way, it's kind of unclear which, but Millie asks Lily to describe Michael, and after struggling to come up with an answer, the only thing she can come up with to say is that Michael struggles to eat at home and that he doesn't finish his meals.
Yeah.
And then she is asked if Michael and Nick are close, and she says, yes, he's very close with his dad, but she can't really say what they do together. She says, lots of things, and she dodges every single one of Millie Dew's questions.
Yeah.
Which is weird behavior.
I think that Millie very much, at this point, thinks he's being sexually abused.
Yeah, I think that all the puzzle pieces are there to believe that.
Yeah, and I wonder, I would have to look into it, how much school psychiatrists existed in the 1950s, how prominent that was to have a counseling system within a public school in the 50s.
I wonder.
I mean, that was the age of pop psychiatry.
Yeah.
The dawn of it, so I wonder, but it felt very 70s, 80s to have her there like that, but yeah, I wonder.
So then, totally new location, we finally get to the lab, which is where Nick works. And Michael's with him, so it's like he brought his kid to work with him or something. It's weird because there are no other kids there, so it's not like bring your kid to work day, but for some reason, he brought Michael to work with him. And he's explaining his chemical, which is a concentrate to be dropped into the jungle so that the forests die.
Oh my God, it's so wild.
Very much so Agent Orange, Agent Purple, it's all very much so of the cultural conversation at the time. This is where we get the same concepts that Return of the Living Dead is playing with. Yeah, the idea of the gas and not fully knowing what it does, but just trying to get one intended result.
Yeah, military destructionism.
Right, exactly. So that's just where we kind of establish that piece. It's not super important, but we get to see the lab.
Yeah, as far as we know right now, I think the testing itself obviously becomes important.
Yes, yeah.
I think it strikes as very odd to be bringing Michael into this because it's a closed military or sub-military installation.
Yes, it's literally called Toxico or something.
Yeah, it is Toxico.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
At home then, the Lemleys are getting ready to go to dinner with Sheila's family. And so apparently Sheila's dad is the plant manager, so they want to make a good impression, and they know that, Michael and Sheila are friends, so Lily and Nick begin to coach Michael on the importance of fitting in a new city, and how he has to be sure he's on his best behavior, and you don't want them to think that we're weird or anything like that. Which, given that their kid is weird. We've seen him behave very weirdly. It's, again, things that are, if you know they're cannibals, it makes a lot more sense. But if they're not, it's also justifiable.
Yeah.
Because you know that your kid has one friend right now, and that this is your family's, boss.
It's me going to my family's, like, work events and them being like,
don't be weird.
Don't make other
Don't
kids...
be gay. Don't be gay out loud.
No, not that. No, I mean, that was never... Not gonna... I mean, whatever. But, no, don't make other kids cry. Like...
Yeah. Oh, no.
Don't make grown adults... I made, like, a grown man cry because I yelled at him about dolphins one time at a dinner.
What?
Yeah. I mean, I think he was an older teenager.
That's a superpower.
I was like, you fucking don't understand anything about dolphins. And I don't remember why I was so upset.
He probably didn't.
He didn't. No, but I... should be...
You should give him some grace on the fact that he doesn't understand dolphins.
I did not... I had no chill about factual accuracy in things I knew about when I was a child. Whatever that means.
So, the Lemleys go to the Zellners, and the adults are all playing poker, and the ladies are discussing recipes and kind of talking about what they like to cook, and Nick shoots Lily, like, a chastising look. He's like, stop it, with his eyes. And then, just with his eyeballs. And in the bedroom, the vibe is already weird with Sheila. And she is tackling Michael, and she's pretending to cut off his hands, so you have to assume that they probably had a conversation relating to what he said with the gas lines. That's the only connection here. And the whole time, he's just asking her to stop, and he's being real polite.
Yeah.
Pushing her off, but she's just pushing and pushing. And we cut back to poker. During the poker game, Sheila's dad jokes that they're gonna have to keep Nick's ego down or they'll owe him another raise, and they're just getting really schlocky, and it comes out that they've been drinking these Long Islands, and they dump the whole pitcher, and they're just getting weird. The vibe is, it is not established, but there is like a swingers vibe to it.
Yeah,
they don't do anything to like make it clear.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the vibe is very much so sexual. There's a weird unspoken sexual tension between all four of them, and especially like the weird nervousness that they have to just be hanging out.
And then that's sort of that unspoken feeling, I don't know, I think reflects a lot on then how Sheila's acting.
I think that Sheila's behavior, which is over the course of the movie increasingly sexual and incredibly inappropriate, and ignores, and again, there's no consent between children, but it ignores anything that Michael says as well.
Yeah.
That it would be unlikely for this to be the case if there wasn't something going on at home. And it's not that there aren't cases of child-on-child sexual assault that come from
just
normal
behavioral issues.
That does happen, but because there's other things that allude to just a vibe in her home that it's just unclear.
Yeah.
But there's a vibe. And over the course of this swingers-esque dinner, Michael and Sheila are watching. And they're just watching this whole thing go down and observing the adults. So then we go home to the Lemleys, and Nick is cooking, and he's teaching Michael while he's cooking. He's letting him know that he should, watch and learn as he does things. But then he warns Michael that other people are also watching him. At school, at home, maybe even in the bathroom. Which is a very dark comment. Again, I feel like we're beating a dead horse, but it's hard to not acknowledge the fact that it's around every corner that this movie drops in this really dark sexuality, but it doesn't label or define most of it. Most of it just exists in this scary place where you feel like you're witnessing that something bad's going on, and they're not going to tell you for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously we find out that they're cannibals, but in other ways as well.
Yeah, you're walking the line that, like, the teacher is walking.
You are put in that position.
Yeah, where you're like, I have a bad gut feeling, but I don't have any supporting proof. Yeah, exactly.
I have no proof, but it feels bad. And then Nick finishes cooking the meal, and he gives it to Michael, and it looks like kidneys again. It looks like organs again. Breakfast is served. Back at the classroom, Michael is pulled out of class to meet with the school psychiatrist, to meet with Millie. And she asks Michael to tell her more about the disturbing family portrait, but he doesn't really have a lot to share. And so she instead decides to play word association and show him some drawings and ask him to discuss how he feels about it. Again, very pop psychology.
I know, yeah.
However, I do think that it does expose some of his feelings.
Yeah.
Because she does hold up a picture of two parents, presumably, making a bed together. And Michael sees it, and he's immediately flashing back to images of the incident where he walked in on his parents having sex.
Yeah.
And he says that he feels very scared. He's not going to tell Millie why, because he doesn't want to talk about it, but he's not doing well. And so then he turns it on her, and he questions whether she's qualified, and he tells her that she's not a real doctor, and he's right. But
he's right, but exactly.
But furthermore, he says that she's not a real grown-up, because real grown-ups don't get upset. Which is just...
I like that. I think that's so interesting. Like, obviously I don't like it in a...
No. As writing, though?
Yeah, I do like that. I think that reflects a lot on his home life, obviously.
Right, how he's, everything is scrubbed for him.
Yeah.
And tried to present to him in a certain way. It's very cultivated. Back at the lab, Nick is studying corpses, and he's trying to observe the reactions to the chemical. So they're using a really interesting mix of scientific language and food language interchangeably as they're analyzing it. So his partner asks him about, how they want to gather a sample of the liver, and Nick tells him that he should puree it. And so it's just not how we discuss science. Yeah. But it's just, a fun way of layering the two together. And then we dive straight back in with jazz. We get the fun music. Yeah. We are going crazy again. And we're back at the Lemleys, and Lily is preparing dinner. Michael is hiding in the pantry, watching through the slats. And this is where we get that very Frank Henenlotter sexual puppetry meet.
Yeah, weird puppet situations. My favorite type of puppet situations. That sounded worse than I meant for it to sound.
No, I think it sounded accurate to what's happening, though.
Yeah, it's tentacle-like, it grabs him,
Yeah, there's sausage.
I don't know how much it fits, to be honest with you.
I don't. I like it because it gives us another layer of the fact that he is also interpreting things through his own lens, and that we are seeing it through his perspective. Yeah. Because Michael is hiding in the pantry, and on the highest shelf above him, there's a bunch of cased sausage, and it comes down and comes towards his face. Again, it's very phallic.
Yeah.
And it wraps up around his leg, and he's being, suffocated by this sausage.
Yeah.
But then when Lily finishes preparing the dinner, which looks like meatloaf, but it's always meat. Whatever we're cooking, it's always meat. She opens the pantry, and clearly she knew Michael was already in there, which is kind of weird. But she opens the pantry and is like, Michael, dinner's ready, and there's no sausage at all. So I think it's just another one of those, implications
it's
that
just
it's
him
his
thinking
perspective.
About meat and the existence of it and the prevalence of it and
right
the weirdness of it in his family specifically.
And another opportunity to cross it over with sexual imagery, but this time without involving...
Yeah, that one's even... I don't know. That one was so weird that it... What did it remind me of? It kind of reminded me of that scene in the second Scooby-Doo movie.
I don't know if I can conjure this as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
Which one?
the island... God.
Yes.
No, it's the first Scooby-Doo
The first
movie.
one's the island.
Yeah.
The second one is Monsters Unleashed.
Yeah, the museum. They're in that weird little dark ride they've created. And all the sausages come out and strangle them. And it's
I forgot about that.
I don't know. That lives rent-free in my head, I think. That weird dark ride. They remade that in, I think, Warner Brother Movies World in Australia, maybe. They have that exists.
I think this is the first on the podcast that people have gotten to hear anything about your love of themed coaster rides.
I do love roller coasters, man.
That brings me such joy.
Prepare yourself. Someday we're going to do Final Destination 3, and you guys are going to have to listen a lot.
I'm so excited. That's going to be a really good day. Later at dinner, Michael is sitting in front of all of the meat, and the parents are digging in, but he has got some pause to himself. And he asks what they're eating. And this is my favorite dialogue in the whole movie, because he asks what they're eating. And Lily says, oh, it's leftovers from the fridge. Michael says that they've had leftovers every day since the move, but he wants to know what they were before they were leftovers. And Nick says, well, those were leftovers to be. And it's another one of those conversations that's like, when you have a picky eater, you don't want to scare them out of eating something. And so, were the movie not already creepy? This could very much so be parents making it sound playful and not wanting their kid to overthink the food on his plate so he eats it. But also, it's a convenient way to leave out that it's human leftovers.
Yes, exactly.
But then, the parents are upset that he's still not eating, and so Lily sends Michael to bed against Nick's preferences. At this time, Michael wakes up from a nightmare, and he walks into the kitchen, where it is clear that we are still in the nightmare. So you thought that he got up, but we're living in it at this time. And in the garbage disposal, there is a hand swirling around in the blades. And then he turns to the fridge, and blood is pouring from the top of the fridge. And we get this overlay of all these shots as Michael is running in slow motion back to his room, which feels like a nightmare when you can run and run and run and never reach your destination. And then there are shots from his parents the other night when he walked in on them. And then there are the shots of the whirlpool blood from the start of the movie. And all of this is piling on top of each other until we cut directly back to the school. At school, Michael is back in a closet eavesdropping when Millie Dew, the school psychiatrist, is talking to his teacher, Mrs. Baxter, and she's saying that she doesn't know how to connect with Michael, but since she can't diagnose him, she's frustrated with his case. It's less kind than that, because she's saying, I wish I could just say he's manic-depressive and say, here, put him in a box, here's your manic-depressive, and, you know...
It's very much like, I don't know how to say this kid's crazy, so we can give him whatever we need to give him.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Give him cocaine, something will change.
I know, I guess that probably wasn't quite the era, but at the same time,
no, it's
not. She's trying to find something wrong rather than
just supporting him. Yeah, right. And Michael is listening in to all of this. We don't get his reaction, but, he knows he's weird. Later, Michael heads to go home, and when he gets there, Sheila is waiting in the tree in his front yard. And she says that she wasn't home because she quit school. So, which is very clearly a lie. We don't get information on why she wasn't home.
Yeah.
Or why she wasn't at school or anything. She's there at his house. So she runs into the Lemley home ahead of Michael and starts running around, wreaking havoc in their kitchen. She's drinking their wine. She's, throwing things left and right. And just... crazy. It's like you released a gremlin in there. She's going bonkers.
Yeah.
And Michael is panicking. I mean, it's like when you have friends over at your house when you're not supposed to as a kid.
Yeah.
And then they start being silly and you're like, no, wait, someone's gonna know.
And even a step further, like a house party where someone loses
it's very much so a house party.
Destroying things, yeah.
Right. And so Michael is really anxiously trying to stop her and following her around, and she runs off and she hides. So he creeps around the house, he's looking for her, and he eventually finds where she's hidden in a large trunk freezer in the cellar.
Heck yeah.
And so she pops it open, all dramatically, and it's uncomfortably, she's trying to be sensual.
Yeah.
And trying to be seductive. And I think the movie does a good job of showing that that's what she's trying to do without actually making the child be sexualized.
Yeah.
She's trying to lay in a sexy way, but she's very much so a 12-year-old.
She's mimicking something.
Mimicking adults.
Yeah.
Or mimicking something that she's experienced or has shown, But she opens the freezer and she says that she'll get out of the freezer, which is what Michael wants her to do, if he takes off his shirt. And so he's just clearly desperately looking for a way for this to end, so he obliges. And she pulls him into the freezer, and she pours wine all over him, and this is when Nick walks in. So it's a very, very uncomfortable scene, but I don't think it doesn't belong. I think it's very in line with all the theming of the movie.
I think it is really, and from, I don't know, and just her age being this little bit older, and the whole thing just makes so much sense for her to be another framing device.
Yes. And to show that there is this scary concept of sexuality and coming of age when it's not always cannibalism.
Exactly.
Sometimes growing up and being exposed to things that you shouldn't be is scary, and not being given the information that you need to understand things so that you can experience and understand them in a healthy light is scary.
Yeah.
So it gives us a nice foil to his parents and his parents' behavior.
Yeah.
So after Nick walks in, later we see that has Michael in the bedroom, and he's telling him a story about a boy who played where he shouldn't have, and he says that he grows up to be a lonely, unhappy, self-centered man and a disappointment to his parents. Lily has walked in during this, and she's telling Nick to stop because he's scaring them, and Nick turns on Michael, and he says that he scares him too, and that he's afraid of Michael because Michael doesn't look like him, Michael doesn't act like him. It's this weird misplaced anger. And then he just says that he's banned from seeing Sheila altogether.
Yeah.
That Sheila's a bad influence. The next day, Sheila has Michael over in the back of the car in her family's garage. Clearly, he left and saw Sheila immediately, despite being banned from seeing her. And when Michael comments on how nice Sheila's mom is, Sheila says that he doesn't know anything at all. That he doesn't know what's going on. And so this is, again, one of those nods that you're like, well, her mom did seem really nice when we just saw her, but we just don't know what's going on. And she turns it on Michael, and she says that his dad could be doing anything at all day long. She doesn't know what he's doing at the lab. He doesn't know what he's doing at the lab, There's no way to know. And so Sheila says that she thinks that Nick is reserved and dark, just like Michael, and that there could be something happening. You know, and I don't think she knows anything. I think that she's projecting a discomfort with Michael having commented on her own family and just throwing it right back at him.
Yeah.
But Michael doesn't like it.
It's true.
It's true. She's not wrong in this situation.
No, yeah.
And so Michael, very upset by that concept, he runs on his own to go sneak into the lab and check things out for himself. So he goes into the human testing division, which is literally what the door says. And that's where Nick works, and he hides to observe. And this scene feels to me just like the Jurassic Park kitchen scene.
Really?
Where it does, because he's crawling under these tables and hiding, and every time his dad moves, he's gotta scoot over and, like, not be seen, but he's gotta also keep eyes on his dad.
Yeah.
There's just this tension to it. The lab is dark for no good reason, but it is completely dark.
It's a wild-looking lab that doesn't look anything like a lab, really.
It doesn't look anything like anything, but it's also just like everything else. It's stylized to be this heightened, dark, scary version of...
It's big,
everything's
too,
big.
because he's
so small. He's so small. But as Michael watches, Nick starts opening up one of the bodies to gather samples when he drops his surgical scissors on the floor, and Michael reaches out and snatches them.
Yes.
And Nick realizes that the scissors are missing, and of course he knows that he is not alone. Something is wrong. And this is when Michael runs out of the lab and starts walking home. Which, I mean, technically we don't see Nick see him run away.
Yeah.
But come on.
I don't know. It's so weird. Like,
they do have more of a reveal later.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
You know, I mean, and also we don't fully understand, based off of the way that the commentary earlier about gathering samples had that kind of food overlay in the language. We don't know if he's worried about being caught for doing something he shouldn't be, or if he's doing his job. You know, it's unclear, and I don't think it needs to be clear. I think it does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
Later, in the dark, Michael is still walking home, and Nick is pulling up alongside him in his car because he's heading home from work. Nick offers Michael a ride home, but it's not in a kind, gentle way. It's very much so that he knew...
Get in the car.
Yep, he knew that he was somewhere that he shouldn't have been. Michael insists that he hasn't been anywhere tonight, and he reaches in back to check out the bag of laundry that Nick had packed, but Nick says that he can't touch the laundry, he can't touch anything, and that he expects some behavior improvements now that he's not seeing Sheila anymore. At the house, Lily is super upset that the boys are late for dinner, but once Nick says that he's picked up the laundry, she drops the whole thing, and they just move to dinner quietly. At the dinner table, Michael drops the surgical scissors on the floor, and Nick reaches down to pick them up, and they catch each other's eyes under the table. This is when you immediately know that Nick knows that he was there.
Yeah.
Of course, Michael claims that he found them on the front lawn, but Nick's not buying it. He says that when little boys tell stories, their jaws tighten up and their lips permanently close. This scares Michael, so he decides that he's gonna go to bed early.
Yeah, bye!
So he kisses his mother goodnight, and he goes to head towards bed, but Nick stops him and demands that he gets a kiss as well. Michael abides and gives his father just like a kiss on the cheek, and then he heads to sleep. As Michael lays in bed, he hears his parents say that a boy his age shouldn't have so many thoughts. And while he's overhearing his parents have this conversation about him, he slips his way into a nightmare where Sheila is at the end of his bed, and she says that she knows what his parents do at night. And then he finds himself being buried in a deep hole, being buried alive. He wakes up in a start, and then he heads down the hall to check in on his parents sleeping. Once he sees that they're in bed, he creeps down to the cellar by flashlight. He's looking around, and he finds a bin of dirty laundry, and next to it, a bloody slab with a butcher's knife. And then this is satisfying. Finally, we're gonna say the thing out loud. He's backing up through the space, and his head clatters against a meat hook at his head height, a meat hook. So we have 3 fake meat hooks, which is great, because it's not like 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Because the 4th one, there's a leg. A human leg hanging off a meat hook. And this scares him pretty bad.
Yeah.
I would say that's a pretty healthy reaction. So at this time, he runs back to his room, and Nick is waiting in his bedroom, and Nick turns on the lamp. He asks to see what's in his pocket and to see why he was up so late. But luckily, while Michael was out, he had apparently stopped in the kitchen and also grabbed a little Hostess snack.
Yeah.
And put it in his pocket. And so when Nick asks, what was he doing? Michael just pulls out the little snack.
Yeah.
It's a perfect alibi. And so his dad chastises him for having a snack so late, and he sends him to bed. And it is so clear that his dad has no clue that he saw anything he shouldn't have, because at the end of the day, Michael is a weird kid.
Yeah.
And he acts guilty all the time, because he's
weird,
being treated weirdly too, and so he is feeling guilty over everything all the time, so he just goes to bed. And then this is what really starts the roll into the end of the movie. Michael goes back to school and goes to the psychiatrist's office to tell her what he saw. He's having visions of what he saw when he first caught his parents having sex, but now we're seeing what he actually saw that day, which is not what we've been seeing this whole movie. At this point, now we see that, yes, he did catch them having sex, but it wasn't just lipstick all over their faces. Now they're completely covered in blood.
Yeah.
There are heaps of organs on a sheet nearby. It is graphic and gross.
Yeah,
and
it's very weird.
So weird. But I do like that it took him seeing the leg to understand what he saw, and until that point, he assumed that it was this... well, I don't know what this sexual thing is.
That's what this is.
You know, he's like, oh, this must be sex. I mean, and it is. He for sure did see them having sex, but they're also sharing in this
in a weird,
bloodlust, grossness. And so once he has this flashback of that while he's talking to the psychiatrist, he runs straight home.
Yeah.
He runs out of the school and runs straight home, and Millie Dew follows him.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think it would be appropriate to follow to an extent to make sure that he doesn't, like, go hurt himself or go...
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would go into the house. Once he's home, I think that I would
you definitely...
contact services, you know?
You definitely don't have the authority to do that.
You don't. However, she seems to be doing a lot of things with no authority.
Yeah,
so.
But she also, it's all from a good place, you feel. It's just...
and even this is from a good place.
Yeah.
He left in major distress. He didn't tell her what he saw.
Yeah, exactly.
He saw the vision, and then he just ran. So she follows him home, and he shows her to the cellar to show what he saw. He doesn't say any words at this time. He's just kind of leading her through the house, and she's like, oh, is this where you saw something? Is this the scary part? You know, so on and so forth. And at this time, there is no leg that's hanging off the meat hook, but Millie does see that there is a rat in the window well. And you know those basement window wells that are, like, up towards the ceiling? Except the window is open.
Yeah.
Which I have not been in a house where you can open them.
Really?
Yeah. No house I've ever been in have I been able to open and access through the well. You'd have to, like, break the window.
We could in the ones
in
Madison we did. Yeah, and then we had one that was a small one that water would come through that you could open technically. And then we had one that was a big one that was technically an emergency exit that you could get through that my brothers both snuck
in and out of the house,
yeah,
I'm
all
sure.
the time. Yeah,
of
it
course.
was perfect. It literally
That's
perfect
designed
for
for
it.
that.
Yeah, it might as well have been a door.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's hilarious.
To anyone with a will to leave, it is a door.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But Millie sees that there is a rat in the window well, and she thinks that this is what scared him, and she says, oh, that scares me a little bit too. So she grabs a stick to push the rat outside, and when she does this, an entire body rolls face down into the window well.
Nice.
And so she screams, and that scream leads us outside, through the house. The scream takes us out through the cellar, and then through the air duct, and then to the other rooms, and then out the chimney, and then we can see... and it's entirely practical, which is cool. They had to build 300 feet of air duct to pull just that part of
That's awesome.
The amount of effort that they put into just this one shot is insane. But honestly, it's a great shot.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm not against it. I think it really works. And so her screen carries us all the way out of the house so that we can see at the driveway that the parents' car is pulling in. We can't see who's pulling in, but we know that somebody's here. Yeah. Michael is super scared by all of this, and so I don't know why this is his instinct, but he tries to close Millie in the cellar. Like, he runs upstairs and he shuts the basement door, and then he runs to his room. But Millie comes back out, and she gets out the cellar, and she's looking for Michael, and she looks in the kitchen, where a pair of gloved hands, one of the parents, closes her into the pantry and starts stabbing through the door slats. And this whole sequence, we have the return of all the jaunty music comes back, which every time the music comes back, I am living. I'm having such a good time.
That's what I want. Yeah.
It just gives this, like, carny undertone to the violence.
Yeah.
That is, if I had to define what a black comedy is, it's this.
Yeah.
It's the carny undertone music to dark, dark violence and sexuality. Like, this is exactly genre, specific. But she escapes the pantry, and when she gets out, the gloved hands with a golf club knock her out. Now, I mean, I think one can assume that it's Nick. Technically, they never tell us who it was.
I assume.
And it doesn't matter, but I do think it's just kind of fun that you just have, like, these, old horror movie style shots of hands.
Yeah.
It feels like a 50s horror movie more than it does feel like a contemporary who's in the house, It makes it ominous in a fun way.
Chekhov's golf club also,
Yes.
I do think that
And we've seen the golf club twice before, too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just around.
And he's had it, so.
And he's had it indoors, which now makes it make more sense why he would ever have it indoors. Because why was he playing golf indoors? Well, now we know that he's got a little something if any of their people get a little rowdy. So then we cut directly from that golf club knocking out Millie to the parents in the exact same shot from the opening sequence, standing over the barbecue and seasoning a pile of meat, the same way that they did before. They bring a fresh steaming plate out for dinner, but Michael, with a baseball bat, knocks Nick out. Well, not entirely. He, knocks him in the gut, and then we cut away, and the implication is that a fight pursues after that.
Yeah, that he hit him and managed to get him down.
Right, because Michael hits him, but then the next shot, when we cut over, is Michael coming to, and he's tied up in the kitchen.
Yeah.
This scene, I love what they're doing with the cinematography, because I think that the dinner table and the chairs are on a turntable.
Yeah.
And they're spinning, and so but the shot is locked on Michael and the family, and so the whole house is spinning around them through this whole scene, and it is just... everything's coming down around him, and the facade's breaking apart, and I just, visually, I'm a big fan of it. So Michael comes to, and he's tied up in the kitchen, and this is a scene where they're discussing what they do. They're kind of talking about it with him and trying to set a new standard for him. So Nick is untying Michael, and he insists that Michael, he's not like other people. Michael is like them, and that if he leaves and tells other people their secret, the whole town's gonna turn on them, and you can't do that. And the family opens one of those good old silver-lidded food dishes. Yeah. Traditional, gives exactly the vibe. Yes, exactly. And they open it, and they're looking down over it. And the whole rest of the scene is shot from the food's perspective.
Hell yeah.
I love it. And so they're all looking over the food, and as Nick is going in to carve the roast, he says that he's been thinking about moving to the mountains, right near the highway where there are all those accidents, and that they'll have more time together.
Yeah,
which is what we said before. And Nick offers to feed Michael. He insists that he will acquire a taste for it, just like his mother did.
Yeah.
And Lily says yes, and I love it now. And Nick is slicing the roast in slow motion. There's a lot of slow motion in this movie. I feel like it's used well. I think it suits how wacky everything else is.
Yeah.
But we haven't really talked about it before, but in almost all of the more surreal moments, or the moments that Michael is doing something significant, we have all this slow motion that comes in and out. But Nick is slicing the meat in slow motion, and Michael grabs a knife, just like a butter knife. I don't even think it's a steak knife. It's like a butter knife from the table, and plunges it into Nick's shoulder. At the same time that he plunges the knife into Nick and into his shoulder, he also knocks over a candle on the tablecloth, and that catches fire. Nick at this time grabs Michael, and he's walking away with him as the kid's kicking, and he's ready to kill him. He tells Lily that they're gonna have another one, and they're gonna bring him up right. And so that's where, way back when you're like, well, I wonder, what their lives were like before, where I think it opens the possibility that Michael is not their first child either.
Yeah.
There is this possibility that's there that, they have a kid to perhaps connect with more people, or to have a 1950s normal life and blend in. But if it becomes a problem, that he might be expendable.
Yeah, I wonder.
It's not clear one way or another. It's just feels like a possibility that hadn't been introduced until this time.
I think the way Lily reacts, in my opinion, indicates that they haven't had a child before, that they, got rid of. I think she reacts strongly enough that Nick is introducing this idea for the first time.
Yeah. Because Lily does not take it, because when Nick walks away holding Michael and saying that he's going to kill him, Lily chases him down, and she stabs Nick again.
Yeah.
So this time, I think she gets him in the back, right? Because she's behind him. And they're on the cellar steps, and she saves Michael in this moment.
Yes.
So Michael scoots away, and then Nick stabs with one of the knives that's in his body. He pulls it out, and he stabs Lily, and they are bleeding out and stabbing each other in this embrace that feels very sexual.
Yeah.
It feels like an orgasm, but in the form of stabbing, which is what stabbing has generally represented in a lot of media for a long time. So I'm not against it. It's on tone, but
it is very much.
It goes. I feel like it needs to be said that the tone of this isn't like classic bloody slashery battle. It's still in the world of this movie.
Yeah, it's a reflection of what we saw with them bloodied and having sex before.
Exactly. At this time, Nick is still alive, but he is horribly injured. However, again, the only weapons that we've introduced are butter knives, so he does lumber around a lot after these.
So much.
I think it's fun. Well, and I think it contextualizes, too, that Michael is so small, and that there's the weapons that seem significant to him. Like, at the end of the day, Randy Quaid is a big guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's a beefy dude at this time. I mean, it's not someone who I feel like you should take down with a butter knife, you know? And really so hard. Michael doing his best attempts to bring him down is like a scratch. Like, it's not much.
I do wish, given the weapons that they choose, like in this scene and a little bit before, I wish that it hadn't been a golf club they used. Because I think it would have been interesting for all of the weapons to be food-based.
I agree.
Yeah, like whacker with a rolling pin or something.
Oh,
really
man,
hard.
and same with the baseball bat could have been a rolling pin.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that
fucking
vision.
Making good ideas.
Go make a movie about it,
No,
you know?
never. Maybe, though.
So at this time, Nick is still alive, but he is horribly injured, and he's lumbering around, and there are still knives in his body. Which felt smart to me, too, because so often people rip them out prematurely, and then it doesn't go well. Which
and he knows about stabbing.
Yes, he does. And that's about to happen to him, because he heads towards the cellar to try to find Michael, see if he's hiding down there, and when he gets to the top of the stairs, he pulls the knife out of his shoulder, and the shock of that sends him tumbling down the stairs, like, instantly. Stupid. And so Michael closes in with a flashlight to see his father, to see if, you know, he's really done for good. And at this time, this is when Nick reaches out and he catches him and he starts kind of lumbering around, chasing him around the cellar. And in an attempt to hoist himself up, he pulls the shelf of red wine down onto himself.
Hell yeah.
Which traps himself beneath it, and it sprays him in this red wave of water. I mean, wine.
Yeah.
Which very much so feels in line with the whirlpool of red that we keep going back to. It's satisfying, a satisfying wrap to it. And Michael, in slow motion, runs away from the house as it burns down from the candle that had fallen earlier in the battle. Which I think it's very easy to miss the candle that falls over.
Yeah.
Because then at the end you're like, when did it burn? What is happening?
I caught it, and then...
It's not super well established.
Yeah.
It's just, like, kind of happens blurry in the foreground.
Yeah, and then I immediately was like, fuck, there goes all the evidence.
Yep, but there's clearly enough for him to, you know, get a little bit of a new life.
Yeah.
Because the next thing that we cut to is sometime later, Michael is at his grandparents' house, and he asks if heaven is far away, which normally... is something that a kid wants to hear. No, it's not so far. But it is, they insist that it's very far away, and so he has nothing to worry about. And he asks what people eat in heaven. And they just brush past that.
Well, you know.
You know, they eat something. At this time, Grandpa carries Michael to bed, and they tuck him in, and they give him goodnight kisses. And one thing I love is while he's carrying him, he's like, oh man, if you keep getting bigger, like, it's gonna be hard for me to carry you. Which is a nice little illusion that he's eating better now.
Yeah.
You know, they don't say it too much, like, oh, you're a growing boy, you keep eating.
Yeah.
But, like, it's just enough to imply that he's eating now.
Yeah.
Which I love. So he carries him to bed, and Grandma and Grandpa notice that he bears a resemblance to his dad, which kind of implies that maybe this is his dad's side of the family.
Exactly.
Which is important, because he was the one who kind of drove the cannibalism bus. And his mom and dad's photo is on the nightstand. At this time, he lays down to go to sleep, and he can hear Lily's voice in his head saying just different things. Like, it's not really important. It's more that he's just still being haunted by his mother a little bit. And he turns and he sees the sandwich that his grandparents left at his bedside table. And it looks terribly meaty and raw and red. Roll credits.
Yup.
And the credits are so fun. I want to talk about them a little
Okay,
bit
yes.
too, just because they play the Purple People Eater song.
Fuck yeah, they do.
And we get sitcom style, like Monsters Inc. style too, kind of combined, so you get the door, like, with the fun, crazy outlines.
That was my favorite part of the fucking movie.
Me too!
I love it.
You get these shots of each cast member coming out the family door and waving and posing,
Yeah.
and that's our credits, and it's just a perfect tone for the end of it. So, that's Parents. Now, mind you, I had seen it before I asked us to see it, and really for me, I was just excited because it's not about it being groundbreaking cinema. I don't think it's groundbreaking. I don't think it's like a must-see. You know, it's not necessary, but it is so fun. It's fun and it's creative, and I just love when people, you know, swing. Show me a swing. Show me that you're trying new things and you're trying fun imagery and you're telling a story in an interesting way. And I do think overall they do land the story well. You know, I think that it's pretty cohesive start to finish, and I had a really good time with it. It caught me by surprise.
Yeah. I like it. I don't love it. I think I don't love it because I like the way it's stylized so much that I wish
You're holding it to a higher standard.
I wish it was so good. Like, I wish it was amazing, writing-wise.
I find this to be on par with a Henenlotter film.
Boo, hiss. I
do.
you, but that's okay. I understand what
Because
you're
I think
saying.
it's in the same world.
No.
Not you. Okay, less weird puppets. Not enough weird puppetry.
It's not that weird. You know what I mean? It is, at the end of the day, a pretty standard cannibal.
It is a cannibal movie.
Story. You know what I mean? And so, not that was as, well, I don't know. It was already pretty established as a trope then in the 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I, you know, it would have to be more trippy for me to, like, love it. Because I think
That's
the
fair.
trippy visuals...
You want it to swing even harder.
Yeah, because it's not reality. Within, like, you know, we were talking about brain damage. Everything indicates that that's reality existing that way.
Yeah.
And in this, all of the trippy stuff that happens...
is not reality.
Yeah, is within the kid's mind. But I
don't know.
I
think that some of the stuff not that we're talking about brain damage, but I feel like some of it is drug-induced and not reality. You know, like when he's in the pool of water.
Okay, pieces, I mean, yes, there are things that are hallucinations, but they're caused by a physical, actual, like, creature.
Yeah.
Or you think about Basket Case, like, I mean...
Basket Case is nuts.
I mean, yeah, they're all driven by creature. It's creature feature stuff a little bit more than...
Yeah. It is.
More than family drama, like, internal drama.
But Frankenhooker is less of a creature feature. Even though we build a creature, it doesn't feel...
It's not got the...
It doesn't have the weird. You know,
It is weird.
It is weird, but it's not as weird. It's the least weird of the three, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess
I feel like that's fairly defensible.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
But anyway, for me, I feel like this hits a sweet spot of style.
Yeah,
and that's why when I was watching it, when I was watching it the first time, I had to, like, stop and actually watch it, because I realized very quickly that it was doing more than I gave it credit for, and I do think that it's surprising that people haven't really heard of this movie. This isn't one that people talk about very much. I haven't heard much about it. It was a random Tubi pull when I played it, and I do think it's one that more people should know about, not because it's, like, groundbreaking, but because if you like horror movies... and you like artistic choices within them, and odd black comedies,
and
you're
swings
gonna
that
be
do
into
hit.
it.
Like, it does hit. It
like,
swings and it hits exactly what it's going for, I think. I just don't care
you wanted
as much.
it to go for something further, but it does accomplish exactly what it is going for.
Exactly,
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. I do think so.
If we're going to do favorite line out of context,
yes, go for it.
Mine is so simple. I love the leftovers conversation. My favorite line out of context is when he says, well, what were they before they were leftovers? And Nick says, leftovers to be. And that's...
I do think that's fun.
That is my favorite line in the whole movie.
One of the things that, like, and maybe this is a sequel bait line, or maybe this is just because it gives more context to the way the parents think about themselves. Not that they think about this as a shameful thing or a shameful secret, but, like, Nick saying, I've been watching you, Michael, you're an outsider. You're not like them, you're like us. So, them being on the outside, not just by what they're doing, but by what they are. That
Yeah.
this is elevated
It's in
somehow.
you. It's in
yes.
you. You know, which is something kind of a theme that people play on with a lot of serial killer stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a darkness that lives in you. It's not a choice, it's who you are. You know?
And they're definitely, with a lot of cannibal stuff, the elevated cannibal stuff, I'll say, like, is this sort of idea that this is beyond the normal human standard. I've risen above what base humanity is.
Yes.
Like, I feel, serial killers and cannibals for sure have that, I've transcended. And, I don't have to follow the rules.
Oh my gosh, like a lot of the dialogue in Fresh.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just like that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and so one of the big complaints about this movie when it came out is that it was marketed as a black comedy.
Yeah.
You look at the poster,
yeah,
and it looks like it could be, you know, obviously they have knives, they're cooking, but it looks dark but funny. And it is dark. I mean, to have allusions of, you know, child-on-child sexual assault in there, to have, you know, a lot of the dark sexuality that is alluded to. I mean, it is a dark movie. But also, at the end of the day, like, black comedy is not dark comedy. You know what I mean? Like, this is usually, like, the darkest of it, almost a little bit callous in the delivery of it. And I think it's on par with other things that have been marketed that way. Like, I know it's not a movie, it's a play, but I think of The Pillow Man, which is marketed as a black comedy, and that is a dark play.
Yeah.
But I think it also has those moments of layering a satirical element over the top, which is, I think, what makes the difference. Take this same movie and change the soundtrack, and that alone, I think, could make it a serious movie, but it's not.
It's not the dialogue. It's not a movie that's got jokes in it, for the most part. It's a movie that's funny by circumstance and by delivery.
Yes.
And that's the same way I feel about Pillow Man. It's the absurdist nature of Pillow Man.
The absurdity, I think, is a really important detail.
Yeah, and I like both. I mean, I like a goofy, quote-unquote, dark comedy. Mm-hmm. But I do find a lot more enjoyment usually in a surrealist, absurd comedy.
There's a depth to the conversation you can have about this more than the conversation you can have about Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
And I say as someone who passionately loves Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah,
but,
or like Cabin in the Woods. Like,
right.
It's just
horror references, which I love.
It's although Cabin in the Woods, once you get to the end, you get a little more like...
you can talk about, existentialism.
Yeah. I mean, the existentialism, I think that they shoved in there in a way where they were like, let's make this mean something.
Yeah.
That'd be one to talk about.
That'll be one to have one day.
Yeah, someday.
But we are not talking about Cabin in the Woods next. We are going to be talking about Ringu, or the original The Ring, which is from 1998. This is the Japanese version, not the American remake. We want to start at the original. And I have not seen the original. Cass, have you?
I have not seen the original.
Heck yeah. Our goal is that we wanted something scary. Something truly scary.
Than I have seen the new Ring, and it's not
it.
Scary.
Not it.
I mean, I think there is certainly a time in my life, or I think dark theater ideal scary time would do it.
The problem is I don't give enough movies their full dark theater scary time potential, because I watch so much at home while I'm multitasking.
I know.
You know?
I
watched Hereditary the other day and it didn't scare me at all, and I'm like, darn, I feel like that wasn't the right experience.
You're like, maybe because I watched it in broad daylight.
Maybe. Well, it was the middle of the night.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Was still with, lights on while I was sewing or something.
Yeah, I feel it.
And my TV wasn't high enough quality to show me any ghosts. So they're like, oh no, someone's in the corner. And I'm like, I gotta believe you. But overall, yes, we are gonna talk about the original Ring from 1998, so go watch it, go get scared, and come back, and we can't wait to yap about it.
This is Kimberly popping on for a second because I forgot to mention one important thing, where you can find us on social media, so please go check out Scary Accurate Pod on all the places. So we're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Go interact with our stuff, say hi, or you can email scaryaccuratepodcast@gmail.com, or visit our YouTube Scary Accurate Podcast to, I don't know, send us crap.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.